Ooh, this is bad. I gotta look at something else before I claw my eyes out. While I'm here... Oh...
In a world of time-traveling tryhards. In a world of masochist streamers. In a world of... The fuck is that?
You think you do, but you...
In a world of...
Oh boy. I'm gonna go with a new angle.
Azeroth has changed. I feel it in the Q-Times. I read it in the whispers. I see it in the subreddits. Much that once was is suspect. For none now play who remember.
Meow, meow. Is that how that goes?
It began with the division of the realms. 263 were given to the Europeans, flawless in form, silent in judgment, fluent in more than one language. 241 to the North Americans, fiery, impulsive, eager to call you hot trash before the first poll. And an undisclosed amount given to the Oceanics, who above all else desired fair ping. In these realms was bound the will and sweat to master the game, time the keys, perfect the routes, but they were all of them deceived. Rumors spread, like blight through Lordaeron. Rumors of salt, toxicity, entire regions, realms, and game modes deemed unplayable. Are the Europeans truly cold and cruel, keyboard warriors of the damage meter, and enemies of mercy? And are North Americans wild and loud, breaking keys with pride and flaming each other like the 4th of July? Or are these just tales, born in frustration, grown in Group Finder, nurtured by the bitter soil of r/WoW? On this journey, we will find successes, and sadness, and rudeness, and madness, as we search to find answers to the questions that stalk the wet dreams and nightmares of all true WoW gamers. Questions like, were all druids picked on as children? Are PvP streamers really only 5 feet tall? Can you purchase illicit substances online and not get caught? And this episode's inquest into whether the WoW community is as toxic as they say online. This isn't a zero to hero story. Those tales have been told before. This is one of discovery, gathering knowledge, of searching for mithril in places where tales tell only of salt. Who am I, you ask? What gives me the right to ask these questions? Why did you even click on this video? Do you think Domino's is open yet? Probably. Well, dear viewer, it is time for the little people of the world to rise from their fields and shake the towers and councils of the great. For I am Salt Measurer, Grief Gatherer, Toxic Tester, Key Bumper. I am he who observes unseen, Pug Tank, the one who queues. Fucking nerd. In the gaming sphere, toxicity can be classified as any variety of antisocial behaviors, like harassment, griefing, hate speech, playing a hunter, or any other disruptful or harmful actions that negatively impact the player's experience. I bet if those early LAN parties had voice chat, you would heard some nasty-ass dork banner. If you're hearing crackling at the end of every word I say and are thinking to yourself, that guy's mic must suck balls, you are both correct and wrong.
My mic does suck balls, but apparently also my voice cracks, which I've found throughout this whole process, so that's cool. I'm hoping it's like a late stage puberty kind of thing and I'll get a couple meters in Mijani. Anyway, for those of you normie gamers who play team shooters and MOBAs, having the largest online audience has given rise to a reputation for widespread and multi-layer toxicity, and it puts those genres tied at the top of the angry podium. This is followed, in close second, I might add, by early 2010s Xbox Live Chat. It has been scientifically proven that nothing stings more than having your 11-year-old Halo teammate describe all the ways he's going to, and I quote here, fuck your mom. I wonder what happened to those dudes. All that being said, the MMO genre is not without its fair share of salt mines, whining Andys, negative Nancys, Debbie Downers, and general meanies.
Arrest that fat kid.
So, if the FPS genre is a Friday night bar brawl down at the local Applebee's, only this time on voice chat, MMOs are more like the Renaissance Fair. Everyone's in costume and they're all emotionally unstable. A cursory scroll through any MMO subreddit will have you at your next therapy session, if you go, saying, you know what, Doc? Maybe my life isn't so bad after all. The conflation between time invested and general skill at any game are often contradictory but difficult to assess on an individual and personal level. It's kind of like spending an hour getting all dressed up to go out clubbing with the boys, only to realize halfway through the night that you get a big hole in the back of your pants. Also, your breath stinks. Okay, so gaming communities can be toxic, individuals lack introspection, I'm not great at WoW, and you joined a group where everyone speaks some language apparently taught by Satan himself. You may not know exactly what they wrote, but you got a good idea. You don't like it. So what? Ooh, shocker. What am I trying to accomplish here? What have I been rambling on about for the last 27 minutes? It's took me like 2 months to edit.
What are you?
I am an American living in Europe, and disregarding the understandable baggage that moniker brings with it, Europeans are funny. I pay taxes in euros, get yelled at in what I believe to be some esoteric form of High German. And Q for Mythic Plus on EU and NA servers. This places me in a weirdly unique spot to test a long-running WoW theory of mine. Which region is more toxic? Also, which realms are kinkier?
Oh yeah, in Sweden, underwear is, the kinky stuff, worn is a fetish, yeah.
I was too much of a pussy boy coward to tank during my first Mythic Plus season, but finally, Season 2, I did it. And if you haven't guessed by now which tank I picked, there was really only one choice. The song fucking slaps. One important thing to note, and something I learned fairly quickly, if you are going to tank, well, at least me, I'm a Blood Death Knight tank, you really can't take on this role lightly. Not to slight my fellow DPS homeboys, but if you sign up to tank, for better or for worse, the enjoyment your group is going to have is in your hands.
People who really want to have a good time won't come to a slaughterhouse.
I would strongly recommend refraining from tanking while drunk. It can get messy. You should be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as they say, when you jump into these dungeons. Have some strong coffee ripping through your system. Maybe your friend Joseph Kane comes to visit. But keep in mind, just because you might be in tip-top shape and rip-rearing to go, your fellow party members may not be. You might be stone sober, but I bet it's 9 a.m. somewhere, and there's a good chance you might get some party boys in your group. And then you're no longer really tanking. You're babysitting.
40-year-old adolescents, felons, power drinkers, and trustees of modern chemistry.
If it seems to you at times that this video was made by 4 different people, in a way, it was. The voices in my head are legion, and I can't tell on a day-to-day basis who's going to take the wheel and drive.
He's all over the road.
Get out of there, stupid dwarf. Okay, so I got myself 2 accounts, one in the EU, one in the US, and I got myself 2 Death Knight. This is my EU Death Knight when he started this journey. I had some stanky trinkets, a decent ring, decent weapon, and some PvP champion gear, and sitting at a 650 item level. Other than that, he was okay. Now, my US Death Knight was an entirely different journey. I had to get him to 80, then once I got him to 80, I had to finish the campaign, which I never wanted to do again, to unlock the world quest, and then I unlocked the world quest to get keys to do the delves, then I do the delves, and I got stanky trinkets. Then I figured just better to go to Hallfall and get as much champion gear I could get from that whatever event from the last patch or half patch or whatever. Ironically, I geared mostly through Mythic Plus. You know, Americans are very welcoming to people down on their luck. It was easy just to get into groups and gear that way, but it was a grind. Also, if I have to do that Death Knight starter zone again, I'm gonna rip the skin off my face. And my balls.
It's gotta be no, dog.
So, I started my US journey at a 639 item level, even nastier trinkets, crummy weapon, and the worst transmog. Okay, so now that I've got my 2 Death Knights, how does one measure or define toxicity in World of Warcraft? Or as empirical and objective as I want to make this experiment, each and every one of us will have different criteria for what can be considered toxic. Now, some clear examples come to mind, and getting a baseline definition seems fairly easy. Obviously, shit-talking, name-calling, blame gaming, finger-pointing, and ass-blasting certainly make the cut. But what about someone who just leaves a key after the first wipe? Is that toxic by our or my definition? What about backseat drivers? The DPS ranked second on the damage meters, but first in most words typed per minute in party chat. Does unsolicited, never-ending diatribes on which route is best, where to go, and what to do count? Or what about the DPS mob pullers? I tank, they pull and die, but that's my fault? Nuh-uh, homie, not on Stevie's watch. So, for the sake of keeping it simple and getting to the goddamn point of our World of Warcraft video examining toxicity that has, admittedly, very little to do with that specific topic so far, above are the list of what I considered toxic for this experiment and what I did not. I attempted 120 keys in less than 1 month on my 2 Death Knights. And I know this doesn't sound like a lot numerically, but trust me homies, it was. Also, while subjecting myself to this madness, I was concurrently pushing my main to a 3K rating. I completed 41 keys on my North American Death Knight. This means that regardless of whether or not we ultimately timed the key, I was able to finish 41 Mythic Plus dungeons over this time period. If we finished it, I call it completed. I had even had a 100% success rate on every dungeon. Yeah, except for Floodgate, Mechagon Workshop, and the Rookery. My groups had 1 overtime runs for the Workshop and Rookery, and 2 for Floodgate. Now, these dungeons are what I consider to be 3 of the easiest keys to time in low-level Mythic Plus. Where groups at this level started to struggle and really fall apart were the Demolition Duo when the Gigazap boss in the Floodgate, that last boss in the Rookery, and the first and last boss in Mechagon Workshop. Also, that Gauntlet or Steamy Bathhouse room in the Mechagon Workshop was a constant source of both humor and frustration. I had one particularly sad +9 workshop that could have been easily timeable, but the healer and party lead of this specific group gave constant instructions from start to finish, died in the doggo box mechanic, took 2.5 minutes to clear the ramp, and was caught by the sentry bots, I kid you not, 6 times. The 4 of us in that party that were able to control our ADD enough to not completely AFK brain walk our way through sentry mobs stood patiently waiting, gauntlet cleared in 1 try, our ears now continuously bombarded by high-pitched robots chanting, "Warning, warning," like they were just letting us know that they had a big fart coming on. Our healer in question ran repeatedly over and over into their visibility radius. If anyone's wondering, apparently 6 is the maximum number of attempts this priest was willing to endure before silently, sullenly, and suddenly leaving the party. The lesson here is, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and then just disappear into the night. You slay, queen. The highest key I completed in North America was coincidentally a 2-chested +10 workshop, which, given the struggles my group had here, was a fitting end to the first part of this experiment. However, the completed numbers above do not include bricked keys, only the completed keys. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something, there were some bricked keys. In total, I had 23 absolutely bricked keys, the shortest lasting 11 seconds into the dungeon, and the longest lasting just over 37 minutes. 19 of them occurred at the very start or very near to the start of the dungeon, usually before the 5-minute mark. I do have to take some portion of blame for some of those brick keys. That first pull in Priory, it's a big yikes. I tend to kind of forget my rotation halfway through running up to the first mini-boss, and then ping-pong between mid-health to low health to just dead. As a newbie Death Knight tank, when I mentally grease up for that pull, I don't feel much like a tank anymore. You know, like all ironclad in my chosen actions, and fortified by my ability to execute and front seat drive my party to glory. More like a kamikaze pilot, and we're all headed to Pearl Harbor. You thought I died. Yeah, I definitely should have though, but those DPS, they stand way too far away. Also, I was drunk as fuck. Looking back over my Priory footage, I could have really benefited from some assistant or something that would simplify my rotation or whatever. Well, I doubt something like that would ever happen. Fortunately, it's not like Priory's coming back anytime soon, and maybe after a couple of years of tanking in practice, I'll get that first pull down. Stevie's in charge of this and... What? The remaining 4 disbands took place later in the dungeons. Cinderbrew Meadery being particularly popular with groups willing to slog it all the way up to the B-boss, 20 plus deaths on the counter, but unwilling to proceed further if things started to go south from there. Upon this bridge, thou shalt not pass, nor would they. From a toxicity measuring standpoint, while it did at times get a bit nasty out there, out of the 23 brick keys, only 5 involved any form of toxicity, and none of which, thankfully, included any overt hate speech, racial epitaphs, or suggestions to, unalive oneself. This gave my US experiment, scientifically speaking, 1 salt out of 5. Regardless of whether or not we actually timed the key, I was accused of not pulling like a man. I don't know what that means, but it does seem like a very apt American thing to say given their, touchy relationship with masculinity definitions. Lady, man, lady. Trolling. How was I trolling? Having poor routing? That is definitely true. I did do that. Inviting the wrong class for the specific dungeon, which, I mean, these were all 10 and lower. You could take 4 paladins and you'd be fine. Excluding myself, the healers were second choice for Mythic Plus's most targeted blamebot. But in a surprise turn of events, a fair share of infighting involved our 3 DPS boys. Like starving dogs fighting over the scraps from Longshank's table. As soon as these DPS smell blood, they pounced. Similar to how Americans say that like the worst state with the worst drivers is always coincidentally the state directly adjacent to their state, only empirically true if you live in either New Jersey or Florida. Or Connecticut, I guess. Ohio isn't particularly great either. Arkansas is actually a bit whack as well. And whose idea was it to have 2 Carolinas? Anyway, our DPS friends quite often put any blame for a poor run or a botchkey on their fellow DPS players. North America's funny.
Put the boots to him, medium style.
One interesting thing to note, and something I found out, is that when you create a new account, I guess the default setting for chat messages is to have the offensive language filter enabled. As after one group disbanded, I received a quote-unquote personal message from one of my group members, and this had a nice little pre-note from Blizzard indicating that the incoming message may have offensive words in it, and did I really want to see what it says? And I was like, oh yeah, of course, Blizzard, like lay it on me, Big Daddy. If I can't read the nasty, how can I test the nasty? Crossing the pond was not an altogether dissimilar experience when it came to general salt levels and complainy faces, but I did find for the most part that the lower to lower middle level keys progressed much smoother than my North American counterpart in regards to clean dungeon execution. Keeping it simple, in the same 40 keys I completed in the EU, me and my fellow Eurotrash completed 100% of our keys under the time limit, so take that fucking Brexit. One point of interest before we get to the bricked key stats is that in Europe, I was twice confronted with a DPS commentator questioning my ability to pull correctly before we even started the dungeon. First time I took this unsolicited comment in stride because like, whatever man. But the second time a DPS sought to slander Steven Hero's good name before the starter pistol went off, I disabled group chat and blasted some hot emo music from my childhood through my headphones to restore my chi. I don't know how you prefer your pre-pull party interactions to start. Yikes, that's a lot of P's. But if I'm getting hints of rancor and general bossiness while the group is simply buffing up, I'm just gonna blast some tunes and zone out. My European runs had exactly 4 instances of toxicity, but none of them were extreme or excessively detrimental to my self-worth. Boring. Oddly enough, the first pull in the Theater of Pain caused more issues in Europe than it did in North America, with 3 very fast disbands occurring here. Apparently it's my fault if I don't give ranged DPS more than half the room to move around in when that one dude in the 3 Musketeer boss group blows his nasty green garlic breath on you. My bad. But honestly, I think the trouble with this boss had more to do with the fact that on the EU realms, groups were much more inclined to pull that one starter mob directly into the first boss group, where North American groups in that key range never attempted to make that maneuver. In the EU, I was called a wanker. Nah, I'm just kidding. That was some Irish dudes who drove by me while I was waiting for the bus last week to go home after work. And technically, they called me a bus wanker, but I didn't get the reference at the time, and though initially a bit frazzled, I did think to myself that they are technically correct, so whatever. We had one instance of in-team bickering, one accusation of me not being able to hold threat, and 2 accusations of poor routing. And that's fair. But generally, the party chat was very quiet. I had 9 keys that bricked before the first 5-minute mark, and 7 further keys that ended after 5 minutes had passed. With all but one exception, these groups evaporated in quiet, sullen silence. Excluding one +10 motherload that broke up literally on the steps to the final boss. We were up to almost 30 deaths at that point, and the DPS deciding to YOLO send themselves to meet their maker by continuously walking into fixating mines, it put a damper on the whole thing. All of my EU keys were either completed or quietly dissolved, like a nightmare you jolt awake from, but can't quite remember what it was all about. No angry messages, no blame game, just boop. One player's gone, and then boop. Oh, there goes another. It was all very respectable and very European. Speaking of the motherload, I could never really find a suitable route through the first half of that dungeon that didn't end in a shit show. I go left to skip some of the nastier ads. Someone gets whacked by a thug or butt pulls into a pack of mobs. Now we're fighting a group twice the size of what I intended. I go right, groups don't CC the mech jockeys, and someone gets knocked by a thug into the peacemaker, and now we got a Pacific Rim situation on our hands. Shit went south either way. For my groups, there is no safe route in Motherload. Only death. And blame. And shame. This gives my European experiment exactly 1 salt out of 5. What we have here is a fucking tie. In the United States, we consider a tie the equivalent of kissing your sister. I always found this idiom a bit strange because depending on where you're from in America, kissing your sister can be considered abhorrent, desirable, or simply Darwinism at work. It's a big country. Interesting point to note, Ireland is roughly the size of Kansas. Sorry, Ireland. Now that we've finally reached the end of part 1, what can we conclude here? What insights can we glean from our journey delving in the dark? Is it mithril that we found? Not really, but we didn't wake any Balrogs, and going into this, I really expected to. I really just dropped that whole Lord of the Rings theme, huh? Oh, stupid. I'm sorry to disappoint you all as much as I do myself, but it really wasn't that nasty out there from a toxicity standpoint. But remember, my dudes, this is just the first part, the kindergarten keys. You don't know what I've seen out there. Honestly, when starting this whole journey, I figured the NA homeboys would be the nastiest, and I would be on the receiving end of some truly vile diatribes. I was surprised to find this wasn't the case at all. In general, I found the NA groups to be more fun overall, usually with some kind of light banter and ass-slapping between party members while we Avengers assembled. The lower level Mythic Plus scene may be comprised of sometimes brain-dead weekend boomers and a couple of individuals who could benefit from a few more hours of sleep at night, and maybe a few grammar lessons. But my findings show that at this level of keys, the community isn't that toxic at all. Far from it. 9 definitive instances out of 120? That's not bad. And if we were inclined to include group leavers as toxic, then definitely the numbers here do change, and with Brick you'd be looking at, what's that, like 30 out of 120 is being construed as toxic? It's at 25? I'm not good at math. Anyways, those numbers stay pretty low. Now I do have to note that I also left keys, and for that I am very sorry.
I'm so goddamn sorry.
I really got burnt out after reaching 3K rating and found myself leaving groups if it got really bad, and then blaming myself for any failures, and then drinking.
I killed them all. I'm so fucking stupid.
For anyone who was grouped with me, especially over the last month or so, I'm really sorry. For the next season, I'm only going to play 2 characters. 3 Death Knight tanks was a lot. The journey was often stressful, sometimes tense, and occasionally a fucking grind. But despite the overall grindiness and general stress I found tanking, I did have a lot of fun throughout this first part and enjoyed nearly all the groups I was paired with. Watching players get booped into the next solar system by the Candle King's very telegraphed pickaxe made me laugh out loud every single time. That shit's funny. You know, on average, most of my keys are run in the 6 to 10 level, and I know what you're thinking. Now, calm down there, cowboy. That's not Mythic Plus, that's recess or babysitting. But that's the point, everyone's gotta start somewhere. What do you think new players to Mythic Plus start? 15s, 17s? I don't know. Where do you guys start? Also, the proportion of players attempting these keys on their alts, especially towards the last couple of weeks, compared to those who are attempting these keys on their mains, averaged out to about 50-50, at least according to the Raider.io add-on, which kept actually crashing my game. I don't know, so I removed it. About half the time, the group was comprised of players over 3k on their mains and just helping out some friends and pals of theirs. And they made plenty of mistakes too, like me. So what's the lesson here so far? What did I discover in part 1? Is the toxicity level between the EU and NA realms really that different? Nah, not really. I mean, there are some differences, don't get me wrong, but toxicity, it ain't that. And is the toxicity as pervasive as I was made to believe? Well, at least at the 10 and under key level, that's another no there, dudes. Tanking is stressful, and you do have a bit more responsibility put on your shoulders, which I admittedly didn't do the best at dealing with, but you also get into groups fast, and to a certain point, you have your pick of any key or group you want to join, and that's pretty sweet. At this level, or at least my level, it's just about learning. Try tanking. You might suck, or you might love it and become someone's favorite meat shield. The one certainty I found throughout this entire experiment is that we could definitely use more tanks. You thinking of healing? Fucking sweet, bro. Ooh, got a rep paladin friend? Slap a sword and shield on that bad boy and tell him that healing's a, I don't know, noble art and one worthy of admiration. Rets love that shit. If the key's not working, maybe put something on another monitor. Or one out for the boys and type out all the things you really want to tell your group in a Word document that you can read to your kids before they go to bed. Be nice, or if you can't be nice, be quiet.
If somebody gets in your face and calls you a cocksucker, I want you to be nice.
Not all NA players are loud, trigger-happy ego goblins, and not all EU players are cold elitists hanging on to the halcyon days of former glory. Yikes, who wrote that sentence? You know, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that emo macro they're spamming actually says something nice and friendly. But I'll never know because, I don't speak Hungarian. And I never will. So what did I learn in part 1? I learned that the WoW community at lower levels isn't toxic at all, and that I forget to press the record button and it takes me forever to edit videos. I learned that it is only together, united, that we survive. I learned that all people across servers and oceans are still people, and I'd like to think that ultimately we're really not so different regardless of what type of bathing suit we choose to wear to the beach. Yeah, I'd like to think that, but I was raised in America, and leopards don't change their spots. So...
Tune in next time as Steven Hero takes on even bigger challenges, like finishing part 2 of this video before the start of Season 3. Will the EU climb the saltmeter leaderboard? Will players grow sweatier and nastier as timers tighten and patience thins? Will he try ranked PvP and Peter Panic his way to glory? Or will he finally move to Thailand for purely self-measuring, nothing sexual or nothing suspicious, no other reasons but that? Tune in for part 2.